The cold wind moved through the alien slave yard like a ghost. Crowds of strange beings stood in circles, pointing, laughing, whispering. 7 alien girls stood barefoot on a metal platform. Their hands tied, each one was trembling. Afraid and dirty. They were survivors from a destroyed moon colony. Sold like broken toys. Their eyes were full of fear, their bodies weak. But one girl looked worse than all the others. Her name was unknown to the crowd, but they called her the Beast. Her skin was burned and scarred. Her hair half gone, her eyes 2 different colors. One eye glowed softly, the other stayed dull and damaged. No one looked at her with kindness, only disgust. She's not even worth feeding, a fat trader laughed. Put her in the trash after the sale, someone else said. The other girls tried to hide their tears. But this girl did not cry. She only looked at the ground, her face like a broken mask. Then a new figure stepped into the yard. A human man, tall and quiet, wearing a black coat and gray scarf. His name was Dorian, and no one knew where he came from. The aliens stopped whispering and looked at him with surprise. Humans were rare here. This planet was far from Earth. But Dorian walked straight through the crowd, his eyes locked on the platform. He didn't smile, didn't blink, only stared. The auction began. The first girl was young and had soft golden skin. She was sold quickly. The second was tall with bright green eyes. 3 aliens fought to buy her. One by one, the girls were sold to cold hands and cruel eyes. Only one was left, the Beast. The trader laughed and said, "All right, last one, or should I say, last mistake." No one raised their hand. People looked away. A child in the crowd pointed and laughed. "She's scary." The trader sighed. "Free to anyone who can carry her." But then, Dorian raised his hand. "I'll take her," he said calmly. The yard went silent, then came the laughter. Loud and sharp like broken glass. "You chose her?" Someone shouted. "Are you blind or drunk?" Another laughed. Dorian ignored them and stepped forward. The girl looked up for the first time. Her mismatched eyes met his. Confused, unsure, she had expected more pain. More jokes, maybe death, but this man, this human, was wrapping his coat around her shoulders. "Let's go," he said softly. She didn't move. "Why?" she whispered. Her voice like dust. "Why me?" "Because I see you," Dorian answered. He helped her down from the platform like she was not broken. Like she was not trash. The aliens watched in silence now. The laughter stopped. Dorian and the girl walked away, step by step, into the unknown. The girl didn't know his name yet. He didn't ask for hers. But something small and warm started to move inside her chest. Something she thought was long dead. Her legs were weak. So he carried her through the dusty roads. She closed her eyes and waited for the pain. But no pain came, only the soft beating of his heart. Only his arms holding her carefully. She whispered again, "Are you sure?" And he answered, "Yes." She didn't believe it fully, but for the first time, she wanted to. They walked past dark markets and neon signs, past bars filled with smoke and bitter voices, into the edge of the city, where no one followed. Where no one cared there, Dorian stopped at a small tent hidden between metal walls. He opened the flap, placed her inside, and lit a small fire. He handed her a blanket and sat nearby without a word. She stared at him, afraid to sleep, afraid to hope. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice still broken. He looked at the fire and replied, "Someone who doesn't care how you look." The girl didn't speak again that night. But she did not cry either. For the first time in years, she was not chained, not beaten. And outside, the stars watched in silence far away. Someone had seen what happened at the auction. A bounty was being prepared, not for the girl, but for the man who chose her. And deep in the shadows, someone whispered, "The ugly one has value." The girl, now sitting near the fire, did not know what was coming. She only knew one thing. This was not the end of her story. It was the beginning. The fire crackled softly in the middle of the small tent. Outside, the wind howled through broken pipes and dusty ruins. Inside, the girl sat with her arms wrapped around her knees. Dorian placed a metal pan over the flames and dropped in pieces of dry food. The smell of hot broth slowly filled the air. She watched him carefully. Unsure of his every move in her life, food was something taken, not given. Warmth was a trap, not a gift. Kindness was always followed by pain. But this man had not hit her, not shouted, not even stared at her face for too long. She couldn't understand him, and that scared her more than chains. She had been bought before many times, by those who wanted to test how much a broken thing could still bleed. But Dorian was different. He sat quietly, moving slowly, like he didn't want to frighten a wild animal. Maybe that's what she was to him, a stray creature. Afraid and dangerous, he slid a metal bowl toward her across the floor. "Eat," he said softly, not as a command, but as a suggestion. She reached out, her hands shaking, and took the bowl. The soup was watery, the chunks too dry, but to her, it tasted like heaven. She hadn't eaten a real meal in days, maybe weeks. She ate in silence, and he didn't speak again, not even when she coughed or when she spilled a drop. He just added wood to the fire, letting her exist without fear. When she finished, she placed the bowl beside her. "Why?" she whispered. Dorian looked up, his eyes calm. "Why what?" "Why didn't you leave me?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because I know what it feels like to be left behind," he said. She blinked, confused. "You're human," she said. "You're not like me." Dorian shrugged. Pain doesn't care about species. She didn't know what to say. So she stayed quiet, but for the first time, she didn't feel like a monster in front of someone that night. She sat near the fire until her eyes began to close. She didn't want to sleep. Not in front of him, not while her guard was down. But the warmth made her body relax without permission. And the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. She drifted into a light sleep, her head resting on the side of the tent. Dreams came in strange flashes, fire, chains, voices, her own screams. She jerked awake with a gasp and looked around in panic. Dorian was still there, sitting with his back against a crate, but something was wrong. His hand was pressed tightly against his side. He was sweating, pale, breathing hard. Blood had soaked through his shirt, dark and fresh. He had been injured and didn't say a word about it. The girl crawled to him without thinking, her fear forgotten, her instincts rising. She tore a strip of her own sleeve and pressed it to his wound. "You idiot," she muttered. "You're bleeding too much." Dorian winced, but smiled weakly. "I didn't want to scare you," he said. "Too late," she answered, her hands shaking. "You're going to die if you don't stop this." She remembered old training. Long ago, before her planet fell, she had been a medical student. Nearly finished, then the war came and everything turned to ash. She never thought she'd use that knowledge again. But tonight it saved him. She cleaned the wound with water from a cracked canteen, sewed the skin with the tip of a heated knife. Her hands moved on their own, guided by memory and fear. Dorian stayed silent through the pain. His jaw clenched tight when she finished. She wrapped his side with cloth from her own clothes, then sat back, exhausted, breathing hard. Dorian opened one eye and whispered, "You still think you're useless?" She blinked, confused by the question. "You saved me," he said. She shook her head. "You saved me first." They sat in silence, the fire slowly fading. The night outside was dark and cold, but inside the tent something soft began to grow. Not love, not yet, but trust, a tiny seed breaking through dead ground. She sat beside him and pulled the blanket around both of them. He didn't move, didn't speak, but his hand touched hers. A small gesture, gentle and safe. She didn't pull away. She closed her eyes again. This time, no nightmares came. Just the soft sound of breathing beside her, the warmth of the fire, and the first taste of peace. For the first time in her life, she felt something new. Not pain, not fear, not shame, but hope. And outside, beyond the tent, the stars watched silently, as if waiting for her story to truly begin. The days that followed were quiet but strange. Each morning, Sierra woke before the sun, her eyes darting around the tent. But Dorian was always there, sitting by the fire, sipping something bitter from a metal cup. He never tied her, never touched her without reason. He only spoke when needed and listened when she did, slowly. Sierra began to feel less like an object, and more like a person. She learned his name properly, and he asked hers in return. "Sierra," she said softly, like it was a secret she was afraid to share. He repeated it once and smiled. That was the first time she didn't flinch when someone said her name. They traveled across dry lands and over rocky hills. Dorian knew the quiet paths far from cities and traders. He said they were going to a place called Haven, a free zone where no one was owned. Sierra didn't fully believe in such a place, but she followed him step by step. Her body healed faster than she expected, and her mind began to catch up each night. Dorian showed her how to start fires, how to watch the stars. He gave her a small laser knife and taught her how to use it. "You might need to protect yourself one day," he said. She didn't tell him that she already knew how to hurt people. She just wanted to forget those lessons. But even as she smiled for the first time in years, even as she felt safe in Dorian's presence, something began to bother her. It started with a strange sound at night. A tiny click or beep like a signal being sent. She woke suddenly and noticed Dorian holding a small comlink in the dark. He didn't see her watching. His voice was low, serious. "She's not ready yet," he whispered. "I need more time." Then silence. He shut the device and looked at the stars again. Sierra lay back down, her heart pounding. Not ready for what? Who was he talking to? Was he working with the same people who once sold her? Was this all a trick? Another kind face hiding another chain? Her chest tightened. She wanted to scream, but no voice came. The next day, she acted normal. She smiled when he offered food, asked questions like before, but inside everything had changed. She felt like a shadow again, like a girl with no name. She packed her things when Dorian stepped outside, tied her boots tightly, and before sunrise she was gone. She ran through the gray fields, past broken fences and empty roads. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to leave. She couldn't bear to hear one more lie. Not from him, not from anyone. The wind cut against her skin as she moved faster. Her stomach growled, her legs ached, but she didn't stop. Not until night fell and she collapsed in a dry forest of silver trees. She lit a small fire and pulled her knees to her chest. Her thoughts twisted in a storm. She remembered his voice. She's not ready yet. Ready for what? To be sold again? To be handed over like trash? Tears rolled down her cheeks. Hot and angry. She had been stupid. She thought he was different. But no one ever truly saw her, not the real her. Then she heard a rustle in the trees, a snap. She grabbed her knife and stood quickly, her heart racing. Shadows moved around her, slow and careful. And then she saw them, 3 dark figures. Alien bounty hunters with red eyes and jagged armor. One laughed and said, "You led us straight to yourself, beast," another one added. "Your little human friend put quite the price on your head." Sierra's heart dropped. So it was true, he wanted to trade her. She stepped back, but they moved faster. A net flew through the air and shocked her skin with electricity. She screamed as her body hit the ground. The world spun in red and white, then darkness when she woke. She was inside a cage, cold, dark, and shaking. Chains wrapped around her wrists again. Voices outside laughed as they flew the ship through space. "You think someone will pay this much for her?" one said. "Who cares? We'll break her bones first," another replied. Sierra sat silently in the corner, her mind burning with betrayal. She had trusted him. She had let herself hope. And now she was right back where she started. But far away, on the edge of the planet, Dorian was running through the trees. Following her trail, his face was pale with fear. He had woken to find her gone. And the comlink silent. "Damn it," he growled. "I should have told her the truth." He pulled out a tracker, one he had hidden in her clothes. Not to control her, but to protect her. He saw the signal moving fast, up into the sky. She had been taken. His voice shook as he whispered to himself, "Hang on, Sierra, I'm coming." And with that, he disappeared into the darkness, chasing the girl who didn't know he never planned to sell her. But someone else wanted her, for something far more dangerous than either of them could imagine. The ship shook as it cut through the thin clouds of the alien sky. Inside the metal cage, Sierra sat with her knees pulled to her chest. Her wrists were bound, her hair tangled, her lips dry. Every sound of metal against metal made her flinch. Outside the bars, 3 bounty hunters laughed and argued about credits. "She's nothing but trouble," one said, spitting oil from his mouth. "Doesn't matter," another replied. "Her DNA alone will buy us a new ship." Their laughter echoed through the ship's cold corridor. Sierra looked down at her hands and felt something burning under her skin. It wasn't fear this time, it was anger. The kind of anger that came after too much pain. She had trusted Dorian and she hated herself for it. The memory of his gentle voice cut through her mind like a knife. "Because I see you," he had said. Lies, she thought, everything was a lie. She pressed her hands against the cold floor, trying to calm her heartbeat. But the strange warmth under her skin only grew stronger. Something was waking inside her, something she didn't understand. Meanwhile, miles away, Dorian was speeding across the wasteland on a stolen hoverbike. The wind screamed in his ears as the desert blurred past. The tracker in his hand blinked red. The signal was moving fast. "They're heading for orbit," he muttered. He pushed the engine harder. The bike jumped over dunes and rocks, fire sparking from its back. His side still hurt from his old wound, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. He had made a promise, not to her, but to himself. He wouldn't lose another person he cared about, not again, back in the ship. Sierra lifted her head as one of the hunters approached. He was tall and covered in metallic scars. He smirked as he leaned close to the cage. "You know, human men always fall for the sad ones," he sneered. "Thought he'd sell you himself, but looks like we got lucky instead." Sierra said nothing, but her heart ached at his words. So Dorian was involved, she thought bitterly. She turned her face away and closed her eyes, but in the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw something else, a flash of light, circuits, shapes, and whispers, voices she didn't recognize. Her body trembled as blue lines spread faintly across her arms. The hunter noticed it and stepped back. "What the hell is that?" he hissed. Sierra opened her eyes, glowing faintly blue. "I don't know," she said softly, "but you should run." Before anyone could react, the ship's alarm screamed. Something was attacking from outside. The hull shuddered violently as red lights filled the corridor. "Contact at rear hatch," shouted one of the hunters. The scarred leader ran toward the controls, but the metal door behind him exploded open. A wave of dust and heat filled the air, and from the smoke Dorian stepped through, rifle raised, eyes sharp as fire. "Step away from her," he said, his voice cold and steady. The hunters froze in disbelief. "It's the human," one whispered. "He followed us," the scarred leader snarled. "Kill him!" The fight was fast and brutal. Dorian moved like a storm, rolling. Firing, dodging, one shot hit his shoulder, but he didn't stop. He used the smoke and darkness to his advantage. One by one, the bounty hunters fell. The last one charged with a blade. But before he reached Dorian, Sierra's cage door burst open on its own. The lock melted like wax, glowing blue. Sierra stepped out. Her eyes still shining faintly, she reached out her hand, and the hunter's weapon flew from his grip. He stared in horror. "What are you?" But he never finished the sentence. Dorian pulled the trigger. The shot echoed and silence followed. When it was over, Sierra stood shaking in the middle of the room. Her breath came in quick gasps, her eyes dimming back to normal. Dorian dropped his weapon and stepped closer carefully. "Sierra?" he said gently. "It's me." She backed away, trembling. "Don't," she whispered, "don't lie again." "I didn't lie," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Then what were you hiding?" she demanded, her voice cracking. Dorian sighed and sat on a broken crate, blood still dripping from his arm. "I wasn't working with them," he said slowly. "I was trying to keep them off your trail." She frowned. Confused, what trail? He looked at her with tired eyes. "They're not after you because of what you are," he said. "They're after you because of what's inside you." She stared at him, lost for words. "What's inside me?" she asked quietly. Dorian hesitated, then said, "Something old, something powerful, something the galaxy thought was extinct." Her chest tightened. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You will," he said, "but first, we have to get out of here." The ship began to creak, warning lights flashing. They rushed toward the exit as fire spread through the hall. Dorian led her through the smoke, holding her hand tight. They jumped onto an escape pod just before the main ship exploded. The pod spun violently before landing hard in the sand below. Sierra coughed and looked at Dorian, who was barely conscious. She touched his face, whispering, "You came for me." His lips curved into a faint smile. "Always," he said, his voice weak but sure. Sierra leaned back and looked up at the dark sky. Stars shimmered like cold eyes watching them from above. She didn't know what she was anymore, but for the first time, she knew one thing. She wasn't running alone, and somewhere deep inside her blood, the blue light pulsed again, waiting to awaken. The escape pod lay half buried in the red sand. Smoke curled into the early morning air like thin black ribbons. Sierra slowly opened her eyes, her head pounding, her vision blurry. The crash had thrown her hard against the wall. But she was alive. Beside her, Dorian was still, his hand limp on the floor. She gasped and crawled to him, shaking his shoulder gently. "Dorian," she whispered, "wake up, please." He groaned weakly and blinked, his face pale and covered in dust. For a moment, fear flooded her heart. But when his eyes met hers, she felt something she didn't understand, relief so deep it hurt. They were stranded on a dead planet. The sky was the color of rust, and the wind smelled like metal. No birds, no water, no sound except the slow hum of the broken pod. Sierra helped Dorian sit up. His side was bleeding again. The old wound reopened from the crash. She tore a strip from her sleeve and pressed it against his ribs. He smiled faintly. You're getting good at saving me. She frowned. You should stop needing saving. Even in pain, he laughed quietly. And that small sound made the empty planet feel less lonely. They built a fire using wreckage and dry alien weeds. Dorian tried to fix the pod's comms while Sierra searched the horizon. There were strange shapes in the distance, towers half sunk into sand, old ruins, ancient and silent. When the sun began to fall, she walked closer to them, curiosity tugging at her mind. The towers were made of metal and stone mixed together. Symbols glowed faintly along their surfaces. Words she couldn't read, but something inside her responded to them. A warmth spread through her veins. She reached out her hand and touched one of the symbols. The ground trembled. A deep sound rolled through the desert. The tower lit up with blue light, shining brighter under her palm. Her body reacted. The same glow appeared under her skin, crawling up her arms like living veins. She gasped, stumbling back, her heart racing. What's happening to me? She whispered. Behind her, Dorian shouted, Sierra, get away from it! But it was too late. The symbols pulsed faster, matching her heartbeat. Then a beam of light burst upward, tearing the clouds apart. Dorian ran to her and grabbed her shoulders. Pulling her back, the light faded slowly. Leaving silence behind, Sierra was shaking, her skin still glowing softly. He looked at her with both fear and awe. What did you do? He asked. I don't know, she said, her voice trembling. It just answered me. He turned to the tower, reading the alien script flashing on its surface. It's not just a ruin, he muttered. It's technology, older than any I've seen. She stared at the glowing symbols and whispered, It feels alive. When night came, they sat near the fire again. The ruins hummed faintly in the distance, as if watching them, Sierra couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw patterns, data, images of places she'd never been. A city of light. People who looked like her, but taller, stronger, proud. She saw them fall in flames, and she heard a woman's voice saying, The key will return. She woke with a gasp, sweat on her face, her body trembling. The blue light flickered under her skin again. She pressed her hands together, trying to stop it. But when she touched her palms, small sparks of energy danced between them. She jumped in fear, staring at her hands. What am I? She whispered. Dorian was awake, watching her quietly. You're not a monster. If that's what you're thinking, he said softly. She looked at him, her eyes wide. Then what am I? He sighed and picked up a small device from his belt. Projecting an old hologram, it showed symbols, faces, and a logo of the First Alliance. Before your colony fell, your people were scientists, he explained. They built things. Machines that controlled planets, healed worlds, stored knowledge. She listened in silence, her heart pounding. They made something called the core mind, a living system that connected every world. He paused, looking at her seriously. When the wars began, the core mind vanished. He turned off the hologram, and now, it's inside you. Sierra's breath caught. Her fingers dug into the sand. That's impossible, she said, shaking her head. It explains everything, Dorian said. Why they hunted you, why your blood glows, why the ruins responded. She looked down at her hands. So I'm just a machine, she whispered. No, he said firmly. You're the last piece of something that once protected billions. His voice softened. And they destroyed your people to hide the truth. She felt tears forming. For years she had been called ugly, useless, worthless, and now she carried something powerful enough to change galaxies. It didn't feel like a blessing, it felt like a curse. I didn't ask for this, she said bitterly. I know, Dorian replied. But maybe you're the one who can finish what they started. Before she could answer, a loud rumble shook the ground. The ruins came alive again, light spreading like veins through the sand. Sierra stood and turned toward them, her body glowing brighter. Dorian grabbed his weapon, scanning the sky. Dark shapes appeared above the horizon, ships. Dozens of them. They found us, he said. Sierra's heartbeat quickened. The blue light around her brightened like fire. She took a deep breath, her eyes shining like twin stars. No, she said, her voice steady now. They found me. The sky roared with engines, and the ruins answered with thunder. Ancient machines rose from beneath the ground. Huge metal guardians with glowing eyes stood around her. Sierra stepped forward as the ships descended. She was scared but no longer helpless. Dorian watched, his heart pounding. The girl everyone once laughed at was no longer just a slave. She was something greater, something the galaxy had forgotten. and this dead planet had just woken up to her call. The sky was full of shadows. Dozens of warships floated like angry giants above the ruined planet. Their engines hummed with power, their lights blinking in patterns of war. Inside the camp, Dorian raised his weapon, his hand steady despite the fear in his chest. Sierra stood beside him, her body glowing with soft blue light. The ruins around them pulsed, responding to her heartbeat like ancient friends waking from sleep. Dust lifted into the air as metal groaned beneath the ground. The planet itself was waking up. A voice came from above, cold, robotic and cruel. Human male, step away from the subject. Sierra clenched her fists. I am not a subject, she said, her voice louder than before. I am not property. Dorian narrowed his eyes and stepped forward. If you want her, he said, and come and try. The ships opened fire. Bolts of plasma screamed down from the sky, burning the sand. Dorian grabbed Sierra's hand and pulled her behind a half-buried stone wall. Explosions rocked the ground as fire sprayed across the ruins. But then the ruins answered, stone panels shifted, and towers rose from the earth. Giant machines awakened, creatures of steel and memory. They stood tall around Sierra, eyes glowing the same color as the light in her veins. She stepped forward, no longer afraid. The machines opened, revealing control chambers and energy shields. They were not weapons, they were protectors built by her people long ago. Waiting for her return, she placed her hand on one, and the machine moved with her thoughts. Dorian stared in disbelief. You're commanding them. Sierra nodded, her eyes filled with something new. Purpose. Above them, the enemy ships circled like vultures. Another wave of fire came, but this time the ancient machines raised shields of pure light. The blasts bounced off, cracking the air like thunder. Then the machines launched their own response. Beams of focused energy. The sky lit up as fire met fire. Dorian took position near the edge of the ruins, sniping enemy drones as they dropped from the ships. He fought like a man with nothing to lose and everything to protect. But there were too many. Drones swarmed the ground like insects. Crawling toward Sierra, she lifted both hands, and the ground itself obeyed her. Stone spikes shot upward, tearing through the metal invaders. Every time she moved, the ruins responded. Every time she blinked, the battlefield shifted. One drone made it through the storm and charged at Dorian. He shot once, missed, but before it reached him, a glowing arm slammed it aside. One of the machines stood between him and death. Dorian looked up and nodded in thanks. Even the machines respected him, because Sierra did. Suddenly, a large warship began to descend. Its cannons aimed directly at Sierra. She could feel the heat building. This wasn't a capture order. It was an execution. They want to erase me, she whispered. Dorian ran to her side, bleeding but standing tall. Then don't let them, he said. Show them who you are. Sierra closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The blue light inside her flared like a star. It reached out to the machines, to the ruins, to the sky. Everything around her glowed with the same light. Suddenly, the ruins sent out a wave, a pulse that knocked every ship back in the sky. It was not just an attack, it was a warning. This planet was no longer asleep. The largest ship charged again, its weapons locking on her signal. But Sierra raised her hand, and a beam of pure energy shot upward. It struck the ship, cutting through its shields like paper. The enemy vessel cracked, then exploded in flames. The shockwave threw dust into the air. Shaking the ground for miles, the remaining ships hesitated. Their systems confused one by one, they turned away and retreated into the stars. The battle was over. Sierra dropped to her knees, her strength fading. The glow dimmed slowly from her skin. Dorian ran to her, catching her before she collapsed. You did it, he whispered, holding her close. No, she said, barely able to speak. We did. The machines around them knelt in silence, not as servants, but as guardians. For the first time in years, Sierra felt like she belonged. Not because of what she looked like, but because of who she was. Dorian helped her sit, wiping dirt from her face. She looked at him with tired eyes. You stayed, she said softly. He smiled and touched her hand. I told you I would. The sky began to clear, stars blinking above them. The ruins quieted, resting once again, but their loyalty remained. The war had started with laughter and cruelty, but now it ended with a girl standing tall, and a man who never gave up on her together. They had awakened something far greater than machines. They had awakened hope, and in the silence of the broken world, A legend was born. The girl they once laughed at, now remembered as the one who turned darkness into light. The battle was over. Smoke faded into the sky like a memory slowly drifting away. The ground stopped trembling. The machines returned to silence. Sierra sat on the edge of the broken ruin, her legs hanging over the side. Her body was tired, her skin still glowing faintly with the last of the blue light. The machines had bowed to her. The planet had answered her voice, but inside her, something much quieter had awakened. Peace Dorian was beside her, his arm in a sling, his clothes torn and dusty. He looked out over the wasteland with a calm expression. No more ships, no more drones, no more running. For the first time in weeks, there was only quiet. Sierra reached down and touched the ground gently. It felt warm, like the planet itself was alive. This world had once been forgotten just like her. Now it stood with her. They spent the next few days building a small shelter among the ruins. The machines helped, moving stones and metal with precision. Sierra gave them names: Guardian, Echo, Flint, and others. They responded to her thoughts, but they also began to show small signs of feeling. Like dogs waiting for a command or old friends listening to a heartbeat. Dorian watched all of it with wonder. He had seen many strange things in the galaxy, but nothing as rare as this. A girl once called useless, now leading ancient power with kindness. Word of the battle began to spread. Small ships landed nearby, some carrying refugees, others carrying messages. They came not to fight, but to ask for help. Sierra welcomed them without fear. She gave them shelter, food, water, and a place to rest. She did not ask where they came from. She only asked what they needed, and they followed her. Not because she was powerful, but because she listened one day. A group of traders arrived, the same kind that once sold her. They came with weapons, expecting war. But when they saw the machines rise from the sand, they dropped their guns. One of them recognized her. "You were at the auction," he said, trembling. Sierra stood before him, tall and calm. "You laughed at me," she said. The man nodded, too afraid to lie. She walked closer, her face unreadable. "You thought I was the weakest." He dropped to his knees, expecting death, but Sierra simply said, "You were wrong." Then she turned and walked away. Because power wasn't about revenge, it was about rising above the pain. Dorian was fixing a satellite dish when she joined him. He handed her a piece of wire, and they worked in silence. After a moment, he said, "You could be queen of this planet if you wanted." She smiled softly. "I don't want to rule anyone." He looked at her, proud and gentle. "Then what do you want?" She paused, then said, "A home, a garden, a place where no one is afraid. And maybe," she added with a tiny smile, "a name that doesn't make people laugh." Dorian laughed softly. "They won't laugh anymore," he said. She looked into the sky and whispered, "I'm still the same girl." He shook his head. "No, you're the girl who changed everything." Time passed. The ruins became a sanctuary. More people came, hurt, lost, afraid. Sierra helped them all with her hands, her voice. And her story: she never wore a crown, never sat on a throne. But the people called her the Light Keeper, because wherever she went, the dark seemed to fade sometimes. She still sat near the old auction yard. She would close her eyes and remember that day. The voices, the laughter, the shame, and then the man who stepped forward. The man who saw her when no one else did. Dorian would sit beside her, silent and steady, and she would lean against him, not because she was weak, but because she had learned she didn't have to be strong alone. Galactic historians would one day write about her. They would say she had a strange face, glowing veins, and a quiet voice. They would speak of the battle, the machines, the fire in the sky, but what they would never truly understand was the moment it all changed. Not when she raised an army, not when she destroyed a warship, but when one human looked at the ugliest girl in the room and chose her, not to fix her, not to use her, not to save her, but to walk beside her, and that choice started a ripple. That choice broke chains, that choice built a home. That choice changed the galaxy, and in the middle of it all was a girl who had once been called nothing, who became everything just by being seen.